Rosario Fuentes is part of a large Mexican family. It all begins in Brooklyn, in 1999. The entire family gathers to celebrate Rosario's first communion, but the girl's mother doesn't like how her daughter is constantly daydreaming. Elena asks Rosario to go find her grandmother. After the move, things haven't been easy for the family, but Rosario's father promises her that one day all her dreams will come true. The girl finds comfort in his words. Then at her mother's request, Rosario searches for her grandmother, which leads her into a far-off room. The atmosphere there is eerie. When the girl turns away, Griselda crawls out of the closet and sneaks up behind her granddaughter, making Rosario jump. Rosario invites her grandmother to come pray with the rest of the family before dinner, but Griselda reminds her that she follows a different faith. The girl has to leave the room. Later, the head of the family, Oscar Fuentes, makes a toast. Today is a special day. The man suggests everyone remember those who are no longer with them. Rosario keeps her eyes fixed on her grandmother, who doesn't join in the prayer with the others. Many years pass. Rosario is now a successful young woman. Suddenly, for the first time in a long while, she receives a call from her grandmother. But Rosario doesn't answer and instead heads out for a run. Rosario's days are scheduled down to the minute. She's a successful economist and even has a personal driver. She's completely focused on her career, but today something deviates from the usual routine. Her grandmother keeps trying to reach her all day. Rosario tries to push it out of her mind and immerses herself in her daily tasks. The news reports an approaching snowstorm and advises people to stay indoors unless absolutely necessary. By the end of the workday, the snowstorm intensifies. The roads are closed, so Rosario decides to take the subway. When her grandmother calls again, Rosario finally picks up, only to hear the voice of the building superintendent, who informs her that Griselda has passed away. For a moment Rosario is speechless, but she pulls herself together and asks which hospital they're taking her grandmother to. The superintendent says that because of the snowstorm, it'll be whichever one they can reach, but someone needs to accompany the body. Griselda has no identification, so there's a high risk the body could be lost. Rosario says she'll be there soon. After that, she immediately calls her father. A few years ago Rosario's mother passed away from an illness, and since then she'd had almost no contact with her grandmother. Oscar doesn't want his daughter to wait for the ambulance alone with the body, so he also prepares to head out. But the bad weather might delay him. On the way, Rosario replays her grandmother's last voice message, in which Griselda asks for her granddaughter's forgiveness. At one point Rosario thinks she sees her grandmother in the underpass. Late that night, the woman arrives at the address where her grandmother lived. Marty, the building superintendent, offers his condolences. The elevator is temporarily out of order, so the man offers to walk Rosario up to the apartment. She hasn't visited her grandmother in a very long time. Marty says Griselda often spoke about her home country. She must have missed it. Rosario hopes her father arrives soon because she feels very uneasy here. Marty unlocks Griselda's apartment with a spare key. Earlier today, the man found Griselda on the floor, but out of respect he and the neighbor Joe moved her to the couch and covered her with a sheet. It's unclear when the ambulance will be able to arrive. Rosario says she'll wait here. She feels deeply ashamed for not visiting her grandmother for so long. What happened to Griselda? It seems she had been practicing some terrifying rituals. The apartment is messy and dirty. When Rosario sees an ambulance outside the window, she feels relieved, but the vehicle drives right past. Rosario calls 911. The dispatcher explains that the ambulance was rerouted to an emergency. They're overwhelmed due to the storm. The wait might take several hours. Suddenly all the furniture in the apartment begins to shake on its own. Then just as suddenly it stops. Maybe it's the storm. Rosario decides to move her grandmother's body to a safer place. She's terrified of staying alone with the deceased, but she has no choice. Suddenly Rosario sees a worm crawling under her skin. She panics, running around in terror, until the worm exits through her ear. She's left stunned, unsure what just happened. Then Rosario decides to explore the apartment and stumbles upon ritual objects and other frightening items. Suddenly there's a knock at the door. It's Joe, the neighbor from across the hall. Cautiously Rosario cracks the door open. Joe explains that he had lent Griselda a deep fryer and would like to get it back. But Rosario is in no hurry to let Joe into the apartment, assuring him she'll look for the fryer herself. She doesn't want to be alone with a stranger. But Joe keeps knocking insistently. He noticed the wound on Rosario's hand and assumes she burned herself while cooking. Could the moment with the worm not have been a hallucination? Rosario hurriedly wraps her hand in a bandage and then goes back to examine her grandmother's body. It seems the woman had followed some ancient, long-forgotten faiths. Finding an old key, Rosario unlocks a hidden door behind the wardrobe, which leads her into a place that resembles a dark shrine. With a flashlight in hand, the woman explores the space, making several disturbing discoveries: her baby teeth, strands of her hair and more. The sight makes her nauseous. Suddenly Rosario hears strange sounds and walks forward. When she stumbles upon remains, she runs from the shrine in terror. The lights throughout the building begin to flicker and then go out completely. Rosario decides to leave a note for the emergency crew and get out of there as fast as she can, but Joe blocks her path, saying he needs his deep fryer. But Rosario doesn't care. She refuses to stay there another minute. Marty tells her she can't leave, the storm has worsened. Still Rosario decides to try and runs into the subway tunnel through the blizzard, only to hear a man's voice telling her the metro is closed. When an aggressive dog lunges at her, Rosario runs for her life. She barely manages to escape when a terrifying entity appears beside her and strikes her. The woman regains consciousness completely disoriented, with no choice but to return to the building. Trying to make sense of it all, Rosario searches online and realizes her grandmother practiced voodoo, witchcraft and other frightening rituals that involve sacrifices. Taking a closer look at the mark on her palm, Rosario is horrified to understand that her grandmother cursed her. She manages to contact her father, who's stuck on a bridge because of the storm. Oscar urges his daughter to calm down. He doesn't believe in black magic or any of that. Griselda was a healer, not a witch. But Rosario is convinced her grandmother hated her for siding with her father after the parents' divorce. Oscar tells her to go home right now, he'll take care of everything himself. But the woman refuses to leave until she finds a way to lift the curse. Hanging up, Rosario returns and sees Joe trying to force open Griselda's apartment door. The woman tells him to leave her alone. She's determined to break the curse and won't let her dead grandmother win. Rosario returns to the shrine and does everything as described online. Suddenly a dark entity starts approaching her. Rosario manages to escape and locks the door before the entity breaks through. At that moment her phone dies. She lights a candle, the apartment is pitch dark, and finds a ritual book written in Spanish on a bookshelf. Rosario reads the instructions for a curse-breaking ritual and begins the process. The ritual requires both her blood and Griselda's, but getting blood from a corpse isn't easy. Rosario's phone starts playing Griselda's last voice message on its own. What exactly was her grandmother apologizing for? Suddenly a sinister entity begins crawling out of the wardrobe, and Rosario hastily finishes the ritual, after which the entity vanishes. The woman is confused. Why hasn't the curse lifted? Supernatural forces are still haunting her. Maybe this is Griselda's revenge for being cast aside. Joe knocks on the door again, demanding his deep fryer. But Rosario still doesn't want to speak with him. Before leaving, annoyed Joe tells her she should have visited her grandmother more often. At that moment Rosario opens the door. She realizes Joe is right, she really should have visited her grandmother more. She feels like Joe knows more than he's letting on. He only tells Rosario that Griselda prayed for her day and night. She was very proud of her granddaughter's success. Rosario comes to a realization. Her grandmother didn't curse her, she prayed for all her dreams to come true. This isn't a curse. Griselda made a pact with the dark spirit Cobayand. Once the condition of the pact is fulfilled and prosperity is achieved, Cobayand comes for you in the form of a despicable spirit from the past and will haunt you until sunrise, until you die. Rosario declares that she breaks the pact, she no longer wants the prosperity it brought. Suddenly the woman that her grandmother's dead hands are clutching the ritual book. She barely manages to pull it free. She hopes to find answers in the book, and learns that the pact can be nullified only if the one who made it sheds their blood into the ritual cauldron, offering their soul to Cobayand. Rosario plans to trap the evil spirit inside Griselda's body and prepares everything necessary for the ritual. At that very moment the ambulance arrives. Rosario hears Marty's voice saying that the paramedics are here and asking her to open the door. But she knows she must finish the ritual before sunrise. Before Marty can unlock the door with the spare key, Rosario hides the body in the shrine. When Marty and the paramedics enter, they're puzzled to see the body missing. Evil entities begin to surround Rosario. She calls for help. Marty hears her and returns to inspect the apartment again. But he still doesn't find Rosario, and the paramedics leave. They have too many emergencies to handle. Suddenly everything vanishes, and Rosario tries to make sense of what's happening. Then the phonograph turns on by itself, and objects begin to shake again. At one point everything goes still. Griselda's body is now clinging to the ceiling. Rosario tries to retrieve it and eventually manages to. She continues the ritual. In the next moment the entity appears and strikes her. When the woman regains consciousness, she sees her mother slowly approaching her. Elena tells her daughter how proud she is, and that the nightmare is over. Rosario feels sorry for choosing her father after the divorce. She thought it would help her succeed in life. Most of Rosario's life, her parents worked themselves to the bone at a factory so their daughter would never lack anything. They didn't want that life for her, that's why they moved. Rosario swears never to turn her back on who she is again. The tone of Elena's ghost suddenly turns demonic. The evil spirit begins accusing Rosario of being selfish. The woman runs, chased by the demon. She doesn't understand what it wants from her. The demon in the form of Elena says it wants her to see the sacrifice that was made. Rosario begins to drift between reality and nightmares, plunging into a distorted past. She sees her family crossing the border illegally. Rosario's family was willing to risk everything so she could have a better life. Griselda suffered the most. Cobayan keeps mocking Rosario, telling her she deserves hell. But Rosario knows this isn't her mother's spirit, it's a lying demon. She completes the ritual, sealing Cobayan inside Griselda's body. The nightmare is over. Morning comes. Oscar arrives and finds his daughter weakened in Griselda's apartment. The ritual book lies beside her. He wants an explanation, but Rosario doesn't know how to begin. The mark on Rosario's palm has disappeared. She now understands the horrors her grandmother endured at the border. Oscar is confused. How does she know that? He only says that Griselda was never the same after what happened there. Father and daughter pray together. Soon the ambulance returns, and the paramedics take Griselda's body away. Now Rosario knows for certain that her grandmother loved her. Later, father and daughter go through Griselda's belongings and clean the apartment. When Oscar finds the deep fryer, Rosario realizes it belonged to Joe. While flipping through an old photo album, the woman sees something unsettling and goes to the secret shrine, where she finds her father. Oscar reveals that he was the one who made the deal on the day of Rosario's first communion. He wanted to give her everything he couldn't. Oscar realized too late what the price would be. Griselda found out about the pact and to save her granddaughter, sacrificed her own soul to Cobayan. Griselda held the monster back for many years, until her death. Oscar promises his daughter that from now on, he will protect her. But suddenly Cobayan possesses his body. Crying, Rosario runs but the door is locked. Cobayan in Oscar's form chases Rosario. During their struggle, the stove in the kitchen catches fire. Joe comes to Rosario's aid and fights the demon, but he is overpowered. Cobayan takes his life. The woman has no choice but to deal the demon in her father's body a fatal blow. That's how she freed her father. 6 months pass. From now on, Rosario dedicates her life to helping others. She never forgets her family, her roots, and she prays often. In the final scene, we see Cobayan take possession of Rosario's body.